Welcome to the Brokers Lounge with Eddie and Carlo. Disclaimer, the information contained in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into account your personal circumstances. Head to the show notes if you want to book a free call to discuss your personal situation.
Welcome back to the Brokers Lounge, as usual with Eddie and Carlo, and another topic this week, obviously on the back of the federal budget coming out on Wednesday night, was it? We will discuss the federal budget and see what does that look like for home ownership, for investments, for property in general. But the most important thing before we get into it is drum roll.
Oh, all
Carlo.
right.
There you go. I got it right this time.
Thank you.
How you doing, mate?
We can stop now. So I've got my drum roll. I'm all good. But doing very well. Thank you, mate.
Yeah.
It's good to be back another week. And
That's
this lovely budget they got handed down the other night. I think the only way to describe it is probably a typical pre-election budget.
Yeah, which is there's always a pre-something budget. Yeah. And, look, me personally, obviously we can't talk about the budget without getting a bit into politics.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of politics because I don't believe anyone is trying to do anything to improve people's lives and the economy as a whole. It's just small band-aids, trying to win a few votes here and there, but I don't feel like there's planning on what the future looks like, how we're going to tackle the $1 trillion debt. Congratulations, we've hit $1 trillion. America, here we come. And it's just, like day by day, it's just like there's no planning, no leadership, and it's absolute shit show. So it takes us back to...
That's a good way to start.
Get vent out at the beginning. It takes us back, I guess, us personally, like the reason we do what we do is helping people to build wealth personally without relying on what the government's doing, because you can't rely on governments anymore. You can't rely on anyone, as a matter of fact. So take that power back, do what you can best by yourself and push yourself forward. Otherwise, no one's looking after you.
Yeah, there's not a lot of measures within the budget that people are going to sit back and go, all right, we're going to be good now. You know, we're back on track, and they'll definitely help us out. And you know, it's like you said, it's just about taking control of your own finances, your own circumstances, and if something out of the budget helps you out a little bit, like your $5 a week tax cut, that'll help you pay for. Actually, my coffees are more than $5 a day.
So it doesn't pay a coffee in there.
Damn.
I know.
Got to cut out the coffees.
I know. So I guess if we are to get into it, I guess first. So we're not going through everything in the budget. We'll just go through relatable things to property market in particular. So housing supply. So the federal government is still doing that 1.2 million new homes. So that's an exciting one because I don't see how it's going to happen, really. But
it's over 5 years, so it'll struggle.
That's 20,000 new homes a year.
Yeah, and it'll, like they said, it's going to come down to the fast tracking of the infrastructure and all that works that they're doing at the moment. Well, everywhere I drive at the moment here in Victoria, there's just roadworks everywhere. There's a lot of infrastructure works going on, so. Yeah, they're really going to have to ramp that up and speed that up if they're going to be able to hit 1.2 million homes in 5 years. Like that is massive.
Obviously, we have to deal with a lot of red tape in Australia in general. So I don't know how they're going to navigate that. And it's just probably another broken promise.
Yeah, well, and the red tape is a classic example because that's one of the things that the federal government's trying to change and trying to, change the way that the state governments are working in terms of planning approvals and stuff like that. They're going to need to speed that up. They're going to need to cut down on the amount of red tape if they're going to be able to hit a number like that. You just can't keep going the way that we have been going over the past 5-10 years with the amount of red tape and expect that we're going to be able to pull out 1.2 million homes. Like, it's just crazy.
100%, especially like sometimes there's between federal and state, like they're not on the same wavelength. Especially if like one's Labor, one's Liberal, one's Labor. Sometimes they're not working to the benefit of what the outcome is rather than scoring political points against each other, which obviously people end up missing out on such promises. But let's assume we live in a perfect world and we hit the 1.2 million new homes over 5 years. What do you think the impact will that have on the housing market, and how would it affect in general, people's
Yeah, I think
state of rental?
obviously the first bit is obviously greater access to, say, your first home buyers out there, greater access for investors to potentially build more properties, and which will in turn help out the rental market as well. So there's been a lot of pressure on all of those markets up until now. So I think the government's really trying to speed up the approvals with regards to high density housing.
Yep.
Which would be interesting.
Yeah, I think we're heading down that way. Like, you can't avoid it anymore. You can't be living within 5-10K from CBD on an 800 metre block.
Like people say, like, Australia's a big country. We've got so much land, but at the end of the day, I ain't going to be living 4 hours from the local, CBD or anything like that. So
yeah. You're lucky enough to not be able to, or you can afford not to go 4 hours away. But I think people who are starting fresh, sometimes they find themselves, they've got no other option but to move further out.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, I guess if they manage to build those 1.2 million new homes, obviously this will regulate prices a bit. It will allow first-time buyers and new home buyers and first-time buyers to get into the market on the lower end of the spectrum, while still staying within a close proximity to CBD and other suburbs. So we'll see how that works out over the next 5 years. What's next, Carlo?
Well, the government's also tipped in going to be tipping in $10 billion into the Housing Australia Future Funds.
Yep.
So that's in order to deliver 30,000 social and affordable homes. So obviously the high density living as well will come into play as well with that sort of thing. So
yeah, that's we'll see how that works out.
Yeah,
social and affordable homes, probably like 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, small units.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the name of the type of properties that they were talking about, but it's not going to be your stock standard 3-bedroom home that we see. We've seen in the past. We're really going to have to see a big shift in terms of the type of housing that's going to be
what
built.
You're going to accept.
Yeah, and that's the thing. What will people be comfortable in purchasing or renting? So
yeah, well, look, I think ultimately it's down to the people. Like, if you have no other choice, then I don't think you've got a say in it. If you manage to still can afford the property you like and the place you want, you're going to have to pay for it, and that's obviously up to you as well. So, you can't be picky when you've got no options.
Yeah, exactly right. Yep.
So, all right. And then we've got the first home buyer support.
Yeah, so I think one of the big things the government had touted this earlier on, and now it's obviously formalised in terms of the first home guarantee scheme, which has been available, but typically in the past it's been available to married or de facto or individuals. Now they've opened it up and said, okay, you don't actually have to be in a relationship with that particular person. It can be a sibling, which would be great. It can be friends, any type of joint borrowers. So that's, I think, it's a really good move, because potentially people can now join forces and purchase a property together without having to be a de facto or anything.
It's interesting. Like, I don't know how wise it is for friends to go into partnership.
Yeah, I think the whole friends thing is probably going one step, probably a little bit too. You'd have to be pretty
cousins,
pretty tight friendship if you're going to be buying a house with someone. But I think it's more the siblings part. I think it's a really good thing to do.
Yeah.
And it could be families as well, cousins. Yeah, you're right. But I think the siblings bit is probably the big thing, because you'll find there will be a lot of siblings out there, brothers and sisters or sisters, whatever, who think, let's pull our resources together. Let's go and take advantage of this particular scheme, which only requires them to have a deposit as little as 5%.
Yep.
Plus, obviously, any stamp duty costs if there are any.
Yep.
And get the government to guarantee the rest of it. So
I guess it's just more opportunity for other people to be able to get into the property market. Is it going to be a huge success? I don't know, but I don't think so. Like, if you're already trying to, like, using whatever's available now, like, this would open probably the market for just a little bit more people to get into it.
Yeah,
it's not
you're right. It's not like it's going to open the floodgates, that's for sure.
Exactly.
But it'll cater to a small part of the market, and hopefully just drive a little bit more activity with first-home buyers.
100%.
The other scheme that they've got is obviously the shared equity scheme, which
so
I'll be honest with you, I've never been a big fan of it. I've always said to people, preference is always to look at other types of options that are available through the first home guarantee scheme or a family support guarantee, rather than having the government take an actual ownership in your actual property. So.
Especially like it's 30% ownership. Like you're pretty much in partnership with the government on your property, and then if you have to sell, obviously you have to.
The expectations from the government is that you do remove them eventually as part ownership, or pay down their ownership part of it.
So buy it back.
Yeah, exactly right. People are what they're essentially wanting is people to actually get properties revalued after a few years and potentially reduce the amount of exposure to the government itself. So I just think it's just too limited in terms of what you can and can't do with your property.
But I guess if you have no other choice.
Correct, yeah.
Like I'd rather own a piece of something than own nothing.
Yeah.
So that's why it's important to understand what your options are and discuss those to see what you can do before making that move. Because, ultimately, if you can do it without losing a 30% stake in your property, then absolutely that's the best way forward. But if there's no other option but that, then maybe it's worth taking it.
Yeah, and the only other downside to that scheme is that the number of lenders that actually participate in that scheme is very limited. I think I last saw was like 5 of them.
Yeah, and you have to do it through the lender.
So it's not going to be typically something you may end up getting the best pricing for as well. Yeah. Whereas the first home guarantee scheme has a multitude of lenders that participate. Correct. So,
and I don't think we as brokers can do that. Like the client has to apply to the lender directly. So but we'll see how that
rental
goes.
Market thoughts.
Rental market, So what they're doing is. So obviously there's been an issue with the rental over the last few years, with just like prices going up, less properties on the market for rent. So what they're trying to do here is they're increasing the Commonwealth Rent Assistance budget by 15%, and that's the second big increase in 2 years. So I guess that's good for tenants because obviously that will help them and support them in paying that rent.
Yep.
But how do you think it will affect landlords in particular?
Yeah, well, the other thing the government's introducing is, they're cutting the withholding tax on build-to-rent developments by 50%. So they're really looking to obviously spur on that activity levels from that point of view, because the more they obviously get built from that side of things leads to greater supply, as less demand, or not demand. That's not probably the word I'm looking for, but
it is like if there's more properties up for rent, people are not going to be.
Yeah, like we're not going to see the typical, almost having to bid to be a renter. Like many years ago, you wanted to rent a property, you just typically get, as long as your referee's stacked up. But now you have to actually, it's like bidding at an auction.
Exactly.
So,
but it's very important to note that this. Withholding tax on build to rent is only for big developments, so it's not for like small investors trying to build like 1 or 2 properties. It's for
the large scale
developers. So if that works, like that could help with the rental market. But then at the same time, like it feels like in Australia in general, like there isn't that big mindset of living in apartments and stuff. So I can see that starting to shift slowly.
Yep.
Like people, especially families, they prefer having their backyard, having their 3-bedroom minimum and all that sort of stuff. So, but at the end of the day, if there's no other option, you're going to have to accept what you
like I see it around where I live, there's a lot of high density living now, a lot of developments that have gone up. But they're obviously good quality ones as well.
Yep.
But they're typically people that have come in from overseas and are used to that type of living arrangement. So they're not afraid to, at least live in a decent area, live in a decent apartment, and they're okay with that. So I think, like you said, I think we'll start to see a bit more of a shift when it comes to that side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Next one, tax and investment incentives. So, Carlo, for investors, so they're looking at CGT exemptions for affordable housing projects and pushing states towards land tax reform instead of stamp duty. What's your thought on that one?
I don't know about the whole land tax reform instead of stamp duty. Like, stamp duty is a big revenue raiser for the individual state governments. Yeah. And moving towards land tax reform, I guess that's what they're probably trying to do, is push the tax element more on those who can actually afford it, in terms of people who own multiple properties. Yeah. Rather than have that big, because it is a big upfront cost that, buyers are having to wear.
Yeah, that's the biggest part of it.
Here in Victoria, at an average about 5.5% of the actual purchase price, which is a lot of money to come up with.
Yeah, and it's similar to all the other states. So I guess this is the biggest part of it, where you don't need to come up with like 40, 50 Ks up front to pay for stamp duties.
Push it out over a period of time.
Yeah, but then how it's going to work with over the time. Yeah. If you sell like within 3-4 years, who takes on the land tax?
Yeah. Will they ask you to repay a certain portion of it?
Yeah, so there's these questions that we need to understand a bit more around.
Still quite grey, isn't it?
But it is, yeah. Like if what we're thinking, like just taking out that upfront cost of stamp duty and paying that over the year, like your rates pretty much, that would definitely help clients. But then at the same time, that's like an extra cost that you need to be mindful about to pay every year. Yeah. So you want to make sure you budget for that accordingly. Yep. And the finance side, so you've got the developers, they're getting depreciation benefits and tax breaks to encourage
the new builds. Yeah.
So if you're looking at new properties, there could be some tax advantages there, but obviously that's all still like not solid, not black and white. Yeah. There's still a lot of talk how it's going to be done. And
it's like anything with the budget. Like, they can talk about all this stuff, but actually getting it into place is another thing as well. Getting it passed through Parliament, all that sort of things as well. So might be worthwhile just touching on some of the other key budget measures that were announced. There's obviously a lot of them. And like you said earlier on, we tried to shift more of our focus towards the finance and housing side of things. But there are certain things that came out of it that will be of interest to our listeners as well.
So you've got the tax cuts, which we touched on earlier.
The $5 a week. Thank you very much.
Basically, if you're in the I think that will affect everyone in the lower bracket between 80 to 40 Ks. You used to pay 17% tax, marginal tax on that. That's down to 16% in 26 financial year, and then down to 15% in 27 financial year. Yep. So, yeah, great. You're saving a bit of tax, but in the grand scheme of things, like, that's $500 a year back in your pocket. So I don't think that's going to...
I think cost of living's gone up by way more than that.
Exactly. So, yeah, okay, it's... whatever.
Move on to your next, because I know you're a big fan of this one here.
The energy bill rebate. Yeah, who doesn't love a rebate? All the people I speak to, it's just the biggest pain is that $150 a year. It's like problem solved. $150 a year. Like, come on, mate. Come on, seriously. But yeah, it's just throw money at whatever, and it makes no sense. It doesn't help anyone. You're costing you, I don't know, $500, $600, $800, $1 billion to do it, but then it's not really solving anything, because then the year after...
It goes back to being a typical pre-election.
Yeah, like instead of actually changing some laws and regulations on energy companies and how they're not allowed to manipulate and, monopolize prices and pass on all the price increases to consumers, and putting on better tax, better laws around them that you're not allowed to... It's not a pure profit game. Yeah. This is like basic stuff that people need to have access to. But yeah, who am I to say, right?
Yeah, we don't want to get too political here.
Oh,
but,
man, it's just
we
pisses me
could
off.
go on all day, that's for sure.
And then you've got the wages and employment. So they're investing in skills training and wage growth initiatives, which might improve borrowing power over time. Also, we don't know how that's going to play out. And also, I think they've taken out the competition if you're like changing jobs.
Non-compete clauses.
So that's a funny one because I don't know if that applies to, like, let's say cafes, or restaurants.
I think it was aimed at certain sectors or certain industries.
Yeah, is it?
Yeah, I think they were more aimed at probably a lot of the trades out there as well that may have that built into it. So it's not going to be a game changer, that's for sure.
Well, it allows us to, see what's out there.
Yeah, and that's what they're trying to just encourage or give the encouragement for employees to better themselves, go out there and find themselves a better job and know that they're not going to have things like a non-compete clause hanging over their head. So.
Yeah, it's true. That's especially if you're in a controlling business where, you don't like it, it's not the right place for you. And you're stuck because you can't go anywhere because you've got that non-compete clause on you. So, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, one of the other things come out, student debts. So to all the students out there, well, it's not just students because there's a lot of people that are working full-time and been working full-time for a number of years and have actually got still their HECS debt or HELP debt. The government is going to reduce them by 20% with effect before indexation applied on the 1st of June 2025.
Yeah.
The other thing they did was they actually increased the minimum threshold in terms of what you have to actually earn before you start repaying your HECS or HELP debt. That's going to be increased to $67,000 on the 1st of July, which is up from the currently, I think it's $54,435. So probably helps out with people that are probably getting towards end of paying their debt. If they're getting a fair amount reduced as well, that's going to be great.
Even if you've got a big balance, 20% is
right? You think of the doctors out there who have probably got $100,000 HECS debt. 20 grand wiped out's not too bad. So inflation and interest rates. Look, I think a lot of this stuff that's announced in the budget was meant to ease cost pressures. The big question is going to be how the budget's going to impact inflation. A lot of the numbers that the government's running and also the big banks in terms of their economists are running is that inflation will continue to track between that 2 and 3%, which will be fantastic. But if it doesn't, then we may see rates on hold for a little bit longer and hopefully not going upwards. And the final thing that I wanted to touch on was the banning of foreign buyers of buying established homes.
Yeah.
So from the 1st of April, foreign buyers will actually be banned from purchasing established properties for a period of 2 years. So it's all about encouraging new buyers here in Australia, younger buyers, whatever it might be, to get into the market rather than being pushed out by the foreign buyers out there. So,
but they'll still allow foreign buyers to buy big companies in Australia and your port and airport and anyway.
Yes.
Bottom line, I guess, from a humble opinion is I don't think this budget's worth the paper it was written on, but it's got a few, I guess, good things like the student debt is a decent one. Some extra measures to help first home buyers get into the market. Other than that, really, I don't see much benefit in it in terms of how we're going to tackle the national debt, how we're going to incentivize economy, how we're going to incentivize competition, how we're going to push people to go back into creation and go back into trying and go back into learning and go back into becoming better, rather than just taking small shortcuts. That's my take on it.
Yeah, exactly right. And at the end of the day, they can do whatever they like, but interest rates has and always will play a big factor in all this. And lending conditions will, play a huge role in terms of how this all plays out as well. So,
all right, Carlo, what's your final thoughts?
I just have to reiterate what you just said earlier. It's not a budget that I get excited over. I don't normally at the best of times, but you'd think with the way our economies have been over the past few years, and as we've ventured outside of COVID, there would be something a little bit more substance to it, but it really isn't. So I'm not getting excited. I don't think too many people out there are actually getting excited over it. So, yeah.
All right. I guess that will do it. If you have any questions, please always feel free to reach out. Otherwise, thank you for listening or watching, and please don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.